Hi there, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Anita Adefuye. I'm the author of the book Reve-Healed, where I chronicle my story and journey through child sexual abuse. And I am also the founder of and CEO of Advanced and Fulfilled Coaching Company, where I help racialized professionals advance in their careers. And I'm also the founder of Loud Silences, and Loud Silences connects very closely with my book in that it's a platform, a blogging platform where we seek to educate and create awareness on sexual violence and also mental health. There are a number of things that I do, quite frankly, and if you've been on this channel long enough, you know that I'm a woman of many giftings and expressions. So today I actually just want to talk about something that I get a question a lot on. And so we're really going to be having a conversation really today is what we are going to be doing. If you're new to this channel, I encourage you to please subscribe if you haven't. Turn on your notification. There are so many things I tend to share on my YouTube platform. But today I want to focus in, like I said, on a question that people ask me a lot. Now, for those who have read my book, for those who have heard my story, one question I often get a lot is, how did you forgive your abusers? How did you do that? How did you get to? In fact, first of all, actually, people ask me if I feel like I'm in a place where I have forgiven them. And then when I typically answer to say, yes, I have, I get the follow-up question of, how did you do that? And so that's what I want us to talk about today. So we're going to go down memory lane together. Are you ready? I should warn you that I don't know if I'll say anything that might be a trigger to someone. So if you've experienced any form of trauma, I encourage you very strongly, watch this video with a lot of mindfulness and just, listen to what your mind, your body is telling you. And if you need help, please pause the video, stop the video, and get the help that you need. So before I answer the question of how to forgive or how I managed to forgive my abusers, I should say a couple things. Number one, if you're wondering, the answer is yes, I have forgiven them. And by God's grace, I hold nothing against them. Number two, one of those abusers, for those who have not read my book, this is how I would know, because this one will shock you. One of those abusers, and the one who actually stayed in my life the longest, unfortunately, was my own father. Now, and I think that's where people really get stuck. Like, how did you do it? Like, it's one thing for a random stranger that you don't know, that doesn't know you, to do something to you, to molest you as a child, but it's a different ball game when it is your own parent that does that to you. And yes, they are right. It is a whole different ball game. And quite frankly, that hits differently. Now, the other thing I also want to mention is that my father has long passed. He died when I was 16 years old. And so my encounter with him in that abusive relationship lasted 3 years, really. So 3 years of my life, I was in that space where I had to live with someone who was molesting me, unfortunately. So I just wanted to put some of those contexts out there. However, and so for a long time, it was hard to really tell if I have forgiven, because it's one thing to have the interaction with the person and then know that in your interaction with them, your body tells you signs, gives you things. When you see the person, the way your heart just goes, some interesting palpitations there. Or you start to get really nervous around them and anxious. So I don't have him anymore to really tell for those signs. But I'll tell you, one of the things that I figured out very, early on, when I got to the point where I knew that I had forgiven him, was I could think of my father and I could draw on the good sides. So without much ado, I'm just going to tell you what it is. So it took a journey. That's the first thing I would say. I needed time to get to the point where I could say that I was ready to begin that journey. Forgiveness in itself starts with a decision, but is also a journey. So it's a point in time where you settle within yourself to say, I forgive this person, but then everything in you does not line up with it. And that's how you can say, I forgive someone, and you genuinely meant it when you said you forgive the person. And then those moments come where you see the person and something in you starts to well up, right? It doesn't mean you haven't forgiven the person. It means that your body and your mind is still playing catch up to the decision of forgiveness that you have made. And so I gave myself time to get to that point where I wanted to even tackle the decision of forgiveness to begin with. It took me a while, all right? And I just want to say this, sometimes it can be hard to even talk about the forgiveness if the person is still in the place of abuse. So forgiveness, it might be a very difficult conversation to have if a person, and it can be any form of abuse, for people who might be caught up in a cycle of domestic violence. I strongly encourage you, get out of the situation, get help, please. Your life is worth everything, all right? And because even talking about forgiveness can be hard if you're still in that situation. So it took me a while, and I gave myself the time that I needed, to get to that point of deciding to forgive. That's number one that I would say. And then number two was, there was a point in time where I decided that I needed to forgive not just my father, but everyone who had abused me, and or even everyone, because quite frankly, abusers were one thing. I realized over time that I had anger towards everybody who my brother is going to kill me. I had anger towards everyone who at the time was in my life and didn't see it. I did not know I had anger towards them, and I'll talk about how I got to realize that I actually was angry at them. But I also had to decide to forgive everyone, including those who I had shared with but did nothing. All right. So I got to that point in the season where I realized that I needed to forgive them. Now, one of the things that got me to that point was, there are many side effects of trauma and traumatic experiences, especially when you've been through, because for me, there were even multi layers of trauma that started happening. And I talked about how, when I was much younger, as a 7-year-old, 6-year-old, living with one of my aunties, she would say it was discipline, and she would still argue that with me till today. But I think every child knows when you've kind of crossed the line from discipline to abuse. And you may not realize, there are a lot of abusive parents out there. You may not realize, but you may have crossed that line. But let's not talk about that today. So there was that. And then there was the layer of, even dealing with not having my both parents together. That in itself is an experience. And then there was the layer of now having to deal with all these different people that had molested me. And then there was the layer of having my father now being one of those people. And then there was another layer that came on later on where my father died and my mother died. So there are a lot of traumatic experiences that I was dealing with, right? And but when I got to the point where, I realized that I wanted to pull out of some of the impacts that those experiences have had on me, it was difficult. So some of it being, there were ways that I couldn't really, I'm a friendly person by nature. So I think that doesn't allow people really see some of the things that sometimes I might struggle with, but I noticed that there were ways I couldn't really open up myself to people. If you're being in my video, you know this by now. I'm unscripted. I don't do no edits. So you'll probably hear some kids noise and whatnot. And we're back. So my videos are unscripted, people. I want to focus on the message and get it out there as opposed to trying to perfect it. So if you want to volunteer for me to edit my videos, my daughter just volunteered. So we'll start editing videos as much as we can. So if I have other volunteers out there, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you in advance. All right. So where was I? So I was talking about, so when I got to the point where I made the decision, I realized that there were things I couldn't really express myself in certain ways that I would love to see myself express. I couldn't, and it wasn't just with people around me. I was seeing some of these things start to creep into my relationship with my family, my husband, my children, and there were things that were happening to me, hallucinations, anxiety, panic attacks. Those things were happening, like extreme nightmares, and I realized that I needed to heal. I really needed to heal. And the problem is that I quickly realized that part of that healing journey is forgiveness. So here I was. I'd held on to this anger for so long. It has kept me from living my best life as I really should have. And I'm ready to heal, but then I needed to cross this hurdle called forgiveness. So I had a choice to make. keep holding on to the anger and bitterness against all these people, including my own father, or choose to be healed. And with that choice to be healed, I had to also choose to forgive him and everybody else. Trust me, if you've been through any traumatic experience, you know that if there is an opportunity, especially when your mind gets to that point where your mind is saying enough is enough, it's time for me to be whole again. When you get to that point, the truth is, whatever got you there, you know that you don't want to go back to what it used to be. And so I had hit that crossroad, and it was time to make that decision. So that was the deciding moment, all right, when it happened. And this was in about 2018, where I started experiencing extreme levels of depression. Suicidal thoughts were returning. I was having extreme hallucinations even during the day, panic attacks, anxiety attacks, all of those things were happening. I couldn't sleep well. And it was just a mess. I was a mess. Again, like I said, my personality doesn't let people see all of those things, right? And I knew how to mask them very well. And so I was at that moment where it was get healed and forgive, or remain the way you are. And I could not remain the way I was. There was so much hanging on for me that I couldn't. So I needed to make that decision. That was the deciding moment. And so I decided that I was going to forgive. Now, how did that happen? Truth is that you can't forgive something that you refuse to acknowledge existed. And so there was some acknowledgement I had to do to say that, Anita, you were molested by your father, period. There was no sugarcoating it. There was no dancing around the bush anymore. There was no calling it names that it wasn't, to say, oh, well, it was abuse. Sometimes we just use the word abuse, but we refuse to let ourselves really define what that means. And because we refuse to define what it means, we can't really acknowledge it. Sometimes you have to name things for what they are. My father molested me. My father abused me. And I need help. But part of that help to be healed is I need to forgive him. So I had to sit down to say, this is what happened, and I need to forgive. And so I remember just being in my room one day and, just really angry. And that's the other thing, is to acknowledge it means that you're also going to feel the emotions that come with it, right? If you're sad, chances are that you want to cry or you want to yell, however people express their own sadness. If you're upset, our voices tend to go high, we're angry, our bodies tend to clench and tighten up. And so to say that I was hurt, I felt the emotions. Problem is that in a case like trauma, in that of the kinds that I had experienced, you feel not just the hurt, you feel the actual pain all over again. Because your body can really not, and apparently this is scientific, your body apparently cannot tell the imagined experience from the real experience. But the fact that you're sort of processing that experience to whatever degree, every pain you felt, physically, emotionally, and otherwise, you actually feel it. Your body recreates those emotions and feelings and experiences all over again. And so I was willing to go through that if that's what I needed. It was kind of like ripping off a band-aid, right? Off a wound. And it was painful. And so but some of the thought processes that I started having, and there is no way I can tell you this story completely without telling you that there was some role that my faith in God played. As a matter of fact, I remember vividly trying to go through this experience of acknowledging that this happened, trying to go through this experience of, feeling the emotions and letting myself just lean into the experiences and telling myself, this is too hard, I can't do it, right? And I heard God vividly tell me, if you refuse to forgive, you yourself will never be free. All right. And so hearing that in itself, it also stopped me in my tracks to say, really, what do I want? I want to be free. I wanted freedom. I wanted freedom from the pain. I wanted freedom from the hurt. I wanted freedom from the guilt. I felt guilty. I wanted freedom from the shame. I felt shame. I wanted freedom from the addictions that I was struggling with because of all the things that had happened in my life. I wanted freedom to just be me, to just be who God had called me to be. I wanted all of that. But then here I was. having to get to that point, I needed to acknowledge that this happened. To acknowledge that this happened, it was almost as if my body, my mind had to recreate the experience in some way. And so I made that decision, right? But then in making that decision, I went through all of those processes all over again. And one of the ways that God started helping me, and I realized that I couldn't do it on my own, people. It's hard. It is hard. It is hard. All right. And so, quite frankly, I started praying to God actively to say, God, help me forgive. Help me forgive. The number of times that I had written stinky, whatever they call it, emails, messages to some of the people that I knew that are still alive, that I'd written to them. I wanted to write to their children. I think maybe I probably even wrote to one of them that one of his daughters, maybe both, actually, I don't remember. And I wanted to hurt them, but I got to the point where, I started praying to God to say, help me, I can't do this on my own because it is hard. And so while I was praying, however, here are some of the things that God started helping me to see. And it was, some of the things that started to help me. Number one, I don't think that they really understood the magnitude of the impact of their actions, and it wasn't to excuse them, right? It wasn't to excuse them. Because remember that these are people that you know too, right? It wasn't to excuse them, whether it was for their own pleasure, whether it was for whatever reasons they did the things they did. The truth is that I realized that I don't think that people really understood the depth of the impact of what they were about to do or the things that they do. And I started to look inwards too, to say, what are some things that I may have done, to other people, intentionally or unintentionally, and I didn't even realize the depth of the impact, right? Now, I had to also acknowledge to myself that while they didn't even understand the depth of the impact, because they don't understand the depth of the impact, they have moved on with their lives. I am the one left here and stuck with trying to undo the impact that they have left on me, right? And it didn't sound fair. It didn't seem fair that they're there living their lives and have done this thing to me and don't even realize, or in the case of my father, that he had died and there was even no opportunity for him to come back and undo anything. If I was looking for I'm sorry, clearly nobody was coming to tell it to me. So I had to step into their world and apologize to me on their behalf. I don't know if that even makes sense, but I had to get into that mindset to say, they're not coming. They don't even realize the impact of what they've done. And quite frankly, I doubt that they care. But I am left with the mess that they have made. And as much as I do not want to clean up their mess, as long as that mess is handicapping me in life, I had some role to play and I needed to just help myself. And forgiveness, I found, was a key to doing that. And so that was mindset number one. Number two, for someone like my father, for instance, I had to realize that in an ideal world, in an ideal sense, no parent in their right minds would want to intentionally hurt their children. And so that made me to start digging for the gold in the midst of the dirt, to say because if you heard me talk about my father, actually, you would know that a lot of life's principles that I live by, or let me not say live by, but there are a lot of things about life and life's understanding that I've come to learn, and I actually learned them from my father. And so balancing that in my mind, in my head, to say this same person did this, how do you balance that, right? And like I said, I'm sorry, I don't have 5 steps to we're having a conversation. And so I needed to dig for the gold being the beautiful things and moments that we've had, that we've shared, right? Before he became the person who molested me, there were moments that we shared. And so I really reached for those moments and I let them be the memories that I choose to hold on to. Unfortunately, his life story with mine and how they intertwine would unfortunately never be complete without me mentioning the abuse. But there was so much more. And quite frankly, one day I'll do, a video on lessons that I've learned from my father, because there's a lot. My father was a very wise man, just not in all the ways that he needed to be. unfortunately. All right, so I needed to reach for those goals. That's two. Number three, I realized that, again, this is not to excuse any behavior, but I realized something. I remember one day I was just thinking about, the things they had done, and I remembered something, people. I remembered that one of those days when my father was going to, pull me into his room and do stuff. I remember vividly there was this pain I saw in him. There was something there. And I remember that experience that particular day. I didn't want to fight. All I wanted to do, he was there doing stuff to me that was hurting me. But in that moment, I looked him straight in the eyes. And I don't know what it was, but I saw something in there that made me wanted to just put my arms around him and say, you're going to be okay. And somehow God brought that particular moment back to mind. I'm sorry, I'm a little teary. And I remember just sitting in my room, because I had a lot of moments where I would sit down and process the information. Like I said, it was a journey. It started with a decision to say I will forgive them. But I needed to go back and, just not trying to intentionally replay the experiences, but I needed to acknowledge the feelings that I felt. And I remember God brought that experience back to my mind. And when I felt that experience, I suddenly felt nothing but pity for all the people who abused me. And I remember just weeping for them. And I kept asking over and over, who hurt them? Who hurt them? Who hurt you so much that you felt that you needed to do this to somebody? And then in the case of my father, that you felt that you needed to do this to your own child. I remembered that experience so vividly. And in that moment, I will tell you this, that I suddenly went from being angry at them to pitying them. Because I recognize that, that phrase, hurting people hurt others, it is so true. I felt like I felt all of their pain and anger, and I realized that I don't know what it is, and I hate that I had to be the victim, or that anybody else had to be the victim for somebody else's own pain. But I recognize that these were people who were hurting. I don't know what caused the hurt. I don't know what pain they were trying to kill by doing the things they did. But I recognize that hurting people hurt others. And I knew in that moment that, man, I needed to be healed by fire, by force. I had to be healed. Because guess what? If I refuse to be healed, and part of that healing is I needed to forgive them, I will continue to hurt, and I will start hurting other people. They may not have been abused the same way they abused me, but something happened to them. I don't know what it is, and I'm not trying to excuse that behavior, but I was just a victim of them letting out pain and anger and hurt. I didn't want somebody else to suffer. I would not bleed on other people who did not hurt me, who didn't cut me. And so I recognized that I needed to forgive them, knowing that. And then also just recognizing that all humans, all of us, you don't have to have abused anybody, but all of us as humans, we are flawed. And if in all of our flaws, God in his mercy forgives us, who am I to refuse to forgive someone else? Again, I hate that I had to be the victim at the time, but I can begin to imagine what I may have said, done, did not do that may hurt other people. And if God forgives me, and if somebody else, anywhere else has forgiven me, really, who am I to withhold it from someone else? And I'll leave this one last thought with you that really just got me into that mindset to say, I want to forgive, was recognizing that in the end, refusing to forgive, I remained the prisoner. There's this, I don't know if it's an adage, whatever it is, that people talk about, that forgiveness is like setting the prisoner free, only to realize that you were the prisoner. It is so true. Lived it, believe it. Because for as long as I held on to the unforgiveness, guess what else I was holding on to? The experience and the pain and the hurt. Because they go together. It's a total package, people. And so to let go of one, you have to let go of the other. Do I really want to let go of the pain? Yes. Then I had to let go of the people that caused the pain. That's how it works. That's exactly how it works. And believe you me, when I did that, it felt like a whole burden was taken off of me. I felt light, I felt good, I felt great. And I liked that feeling and I wanted to keep that feeling. And so every time maybe something happens, because sometimes you get triggers, right? Something, might trigger an experience for you. Like some people might be watching this video and, I've been doing my best not to, be as descriptive in my videos. You want the description, go and read the book. But it's not about the description, it's about the lessons that are there to be learned. And so I try not to be descriptive. But, sometimes I might have triggers. And sometimes triggers might bring a person to memory. Or I might be on Facebook and I see the child of, because some of them are still my friends. It's weird. Don't ask me. But when those moments come and the feelings of forgiveness don't match up with the decision of forgiveness, remember I said that I felt good when I made the decision and I called out the names of every individual. And I said, I forgive you for doing, I was very specific. I forgive you for doing this and this and this and this and this to me. All right. I forgive them. And when I did all of that, the way I felt, every time the feelings of forgiveness does not match up my decision, I remind my brain of that feeling where I felt light and good, so that it reinforces to me, it reinforces and validates the feelings of forgiveness to match up with the decision of the forgiveness. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, sorry if I've confused you there. All right. And then the other thing too, really, and I said that was the last one, but it's not. Like I said, this is a conversation. So the other thing too that I realized I needed to do, this one was very weird. I needed to forgive myself as well. I don't know what it is, but if you've been through any traumatic experiences, especially abuse, there's something in you that keeps telling yourself that you caused it, you did something to deserve it. If you've ever felt that way, let me settle it for you. If your mind has not gotten you to that point, you did not cause anything, it was not your fault. Don't let anybody try to make you feel like it was your fault or you did something. It was not your fault. All right. But still, there was something in me that I needed to forgive myself so that I can let go of the shame and the guilt that I felt. I don't know why I felt it, but I remember just saying to myself, Anita, I forgive you. I forgive you. You didn't deserve this. You didn't have to go through this. You didn't have to feel the shame. You don't have to feel the guilt. But I just want you to know that I love you and I forgive you. And the other person I needed to forgive was God. Oh, yes. This is the part where all the Christian brothers and sisters have left the room. At least the seemingly sanctimonious ones. They've left, guys. They've left. See them leaving. But here's the thing. Believe it or not, some of us, maybe not all of us, but so many of us, when horrible experiences like that happen to us, we low-key have anger against God. And you know how I know? Sometimes you will question, God, when? God, why? Those questions come. But let me help somebody be free today. God is not afraid of you asking those questions. If people have told you that, God, you shouldn't talk to God like that. Look, God is not afraid of you asking those questions. As a matter of fact, the true test of your sonship or of God's fatherhood in your life is that you can dare to be intimate with Him in the expressions of your feelings. If you can dare, you are a true child, because a child will not be afraid to talk to the parent about how they feel. That even if you don't get the reaction or the response that you were hoping for, you know that they love you enough and there should be a safe space enough for you to be able to freely express. If you're not in that place where you think you can freely express with God, you're not fully, something is wrong with how you perceive the fatherhood of God in your life. And I'm sorry if that goes against the grains of everything you've been told, and no. I got to a point where I realized that I needed to forgive God. Not because He needs my forgiveness, but because I truly was holding on and holding out on God. Because I asked the question, because I prayed, because I begged. I said, God, please make it stop. I heard there's a God in heaven. Make it stop. And it didn't stop. So I was angry. And honestly speaking, it felt like rightfully so. Oh, I was hurt. And because I was hurt and I was angry, I recognized that I was angry at God too. Because I prayed to him. And so crazy as it sounds, I said, God, I forgive you. Not because you need my forgiveness, but it was a way of saying that I'm letting go of all that. And you know what? The crazy thing is, if you read my book, you've probably read that part of the story. When I remember the day where I had that conversation with God, the moment when I was ready to forgive God. I'm sorry. I know it sounds weird. I remember having a conversation with God and I said, God, where were you? I just wanted to understand. Why? Why didn't you help me? Why didn't you let go? In fact, the response and all of that, that's a teaching on its own. And maybe one day we'll talk about that. But here's one thing that happened that I felt so... like, it's a moment where I felt like I would always serve God. Because rather than the reproach that people would think that God will throw at you, or rather than the, how dare you question me, my child, I didn't get that. All I got was a still small voice that said to me, I was the reason you never let go. All I got was, I was the reason I was there. I was the reason it didn't get any worse than it is. I was the reason when you wanted to let go, you didn't let go. I know you might be angry to say, well, but why didn't God just stop it? I was angry too. That's why I needed to forgive God. And I'll talk about that in another video. About, how you still continue to hold on to faith and why sometimes those things happen. Why do those kinds of experiences happen? And when they happen, why do people like me come back and say God is the reason it wasn't worse than it was? Rather than, say, well, why didn't he just not let it happen? Oh, I'll tell you why. Because I understood it that day as well. But I had to forgive God. So, I share all this today because I find that a lot of people struggle with forgiving people. A lot of people struggle with forgiving ourselves. I struggle too. But the truth is that if you're going to be truly free, whatever you've experienced, look, I know some experiences are very painful and very horrible. I have even heard horrible stories, more than mine. But the truth is that if you're going to be truly free, you're going to have to forgive. Freedom and forgiveness really are two sides of the same coin. So, who do you need to forgive today? I really hope that you can find it in you to forgive them, to forgive yourself, and to forgive God. I really hope this helps someone. Thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please give this video a like. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Like I said, I talk about all things mental health, sexual violence, creating awareness so that people can, survivors can pull out of experiences that they found themselves in. People, who have survivors as friends, family, you can know how to approach and help your loved ones. And just overall for all of us as a society to be educated. And then there's other things too that I typically talk about: career, women, and a whole lot, and faith. So thank you so much, and I really hope to see you in the next video. Take care now.